So for a really long time, I've had an opinion about 16-inch gaming laptops. I've always thought that they're just too big and bulky, until I tried this one. Here we have the 2024 Legion 7i from Lenovo, and this is their attempt at making a thinner than normal premium gaming laptop. And at least on paper, they've done a good job. This is rocking a i7-14700HX CPU with a full-blown RTX 4070. But I have two major concerns. Does the thinner form factor affect performance? And more importantly, does it affect thermals? Well, let's find out. Taking a look at the Legion 7i, for a gaming laptop, it's actually very sleek. It has brushed metal sides and overall very simple and elegant design, which is not very common with gaming laptops. And it's also built like a tank, like literally a tank. Full metal construction, so little to no flex on the top lid. The keyboard deck feels solid and the bottom panel also feels really sturdy. It's also thinner compared to your normal gaming laptop, like that's the whole point of this Legion 7i. It's 0.69 inches at its thinnest and 0.78 inches at its thickest. It also weighs around 2.3 kilograms, which is normal, like most gaming laptops are in that weight class. And if you add the power adapter, which is 230 watts, you're carrying around 3,300 grams in your backpack. So weight is not really the advantage here. It's the form factor. It is thinner and smaller compared to your other 16-inch gaming laptops on the market. Now, it's also available in two colors, Eclipse Black, the one I have here, and the Glacier White color, which looks awesome in my opinion. Now, one thing about this Eclipse Black color is that it gets covered in fingerprints. It is a fingerprint magnet, so if you're the kind of person who likes to eat Doritos and play games at the same time, I'd suggest clean it up a bit from time to time, otherwise it's gonna look gross. Now, talking about the rest of the build, it's got a really solid hinge, which is very smooth, perfect tension, not too tight, not too loose, and it's a 180-degree hinge, so it goes all the way back. And it's also very easy to open this laptop since the screen, kind of comes out a bit here. And it is a one-hand open since the bottom is heavy. And also, the display assembly feels very solid. Like there is slight wobble, but there is no flexing, which is good to know. And overall, in terms of design and build quality, I really like the Legion 7i. Now talking about ports, on the left side we have a USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port, followed by a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port. This supports DisplayPort 1.4, really fast data transfers, 10 gigabits per second, and 140 watts of power delivery. This is actually connected to the dedicated GPU, so the RTX 4070 in this case, and you're going to get display output from that. Next to that is a Thunderbolt 4 port, which again supports 140 watts of power delivery. You've got really fast data transfers, and this is connected to the Intel UHD graphics. So you're going to get display output from this, but not from the dedicated GPU. Next to that is a combo headphone and microphone jack, so it supports both headsets as well as microphones. Now on the right side, we have a full-size SD card reader, which is good to have. Like I'm always complaining that laptops don't have a full-size SD card reader, so it's nice to have here. So if you're someone who likes to edit photos or videos, especially for content creators, this is going to be very handy. But in my testing, I found out that this is of the slower type. It is not UHS-2 compatible. If you have a really fast card, let's say 200 megabytes per second or 250 megabytes per second, you're not going to get the full speed here. This is limited to about 100 megabytes per second. Next to that is your webcam switch, so you can enable and disable your webcam from this. And you also have another USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port. Now this does not support power delivery or DisplayPort. This is just for data transfer and connecting peripherals. Last but not the least, you have a USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port. Another thing that I found out is that the Type A ports are capped to 5 gigabits per second, not the full 10 gigabits per second that this actually supports, which is not making sense to me, but it is something that you guys should know. Now towards the back, you have your HDMI 2.1 port and the power input. One port we're missing here is the Ethernet jack, and most gaming laptops do come with a full-size Ethernet jack. And here we don't have it, so it is kind of disappointing. So this is a webcam test of the Lenovo Legion 7i. It's got a 1080p camera, with dual mics, so you're looking at the video quality, also listening to the audio from the internal microphones. It doesn't have an NPU, so you don't have the Windows Studio effects like blurring the background and stuff, but I'm sure you'll be able to do that in the app you're using this in. But you guys let me know in the comments down below what do you think about the video and audio quality. Now talking about the keyboard and trackpad, the Legion 7i comes with a full-size keyboard with a number pad and big arrow keys, unlike some of the laptops that give you those tiny arrow keys, which are just a nightmare to use. I'm glad that we have proper full-sized arrow keys, and this is actually a really nice keyboard. It's got good travel, good feedback, and I personally enjoy typing on this. It's got 1.5 millimeters of travel, and yeah, it's not like those cheapo keyboards. It actually feels really good. It has that bouncy feel, and it's a perky RGB keyboard, so you can customize each key inside the Lenovo Vantage software. You can give it a different color, different brightness levels, do whatever you want. Like, imagination is the limit here, and overall I really like the keyboard. Now on top is the power button, which also is the fingerprint scanner. So if it's lit up green, it is going to act as a fingerprint scanner and can help you sign in to Windows. Now talking about the trackpad, it is actually a glass trackpad. It's a decent size, and mostly with gaming laptops you are going to be using a mouse, but this trackpad is actually really good. Like, it's precise, very accurate, smooth tracking, supports all the gestures and stuff. My only complaint here is that the clicks are kind of loud, so if you are working in a cafe or if you're in a library or something like that, this can get a little annoying. Now talking about speakers, we've got a stereo pair here, 2 watt each, one on the left, one on the right, and they're bottom firing. And for gaming laptop standards, these are pretty decent. They get plenty loud, clarity is good. They do lack bass, but I was playing Cyberpunk on this while testing the laptop, and all the dialogues and everything sounded really clear. I personally enjoyed using these speakers, so if you're watching videos or listening to music or just playing games, these are actually very usable. Now talking about that display, this is a 16-inch 3.2K resolution IPS panel with anti-glare coating, so there's not a lot of reflections here. It's got a 16:10 aspect ratio, so it's taller compared to your traditional displays, and this is going to be useful if you're scrolling documents or web pages. You're going to see more content because of that taller aspect ratio. But let's say you play a native 16:9 game or play a video that is 16:9, you're going to have bars on the top and bottom, and that's a trade-off you have to make for the taller aspect ratio. It's also got display HDR 400 support. It can go up to 430 nits in terms of the peak brightness, covers 100% of the DCI P3 color space. So if you're doing video editing or photo editing, in general, if you're doing color sensitive work, this panel can actually give you accurate representation. And it's 165 Hz, which was very responsive and very smooth. Whether I was playing games, watching videos, or just scrolling through the UI, it was actually a lot of fun. It gets plenty bright for indoor usage, so I personally had no issues with the display. Alright, it's about time we talk about performance. Under the hood, the Legion 7i is rocking the 14th generation Core i7 14700HX CPU, which is a 20-core 28-thread chip with a base clock of 2.3 GHz and a max boost of 5.5. You've got 8 performance cores and 12 efficiency cores. and that processor is coupled with 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM that is running at 5600 megahertz. We've got 1 terabyte of PCI Gen 4 NVMe SSD, and the read and write speeds on this SSD are actually really good, like true Gen 4 speeds, which makes the system very responsive. And the star of the show here is 130 watt TGP RTX 4070. Now, most of the time it's going to run at 115 watts, but Nvidia has something called as dynamic boost, which adds another 15 watts for extra performance. And that card has 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory. Paper specs aside, I started my testing with synthetic benchmarks. So Cinebench 2024, Geekbench 6, V-Ray, and Blender. And I'm going to put up all the scores on your screens right now. In terms of raw performance, we're not really losing out here. It is very competitive with other laptops with similar specifications and chips from AMD or Apple. Now, talking about gaming performance, I started my testing with esports titles at 1080p. CS2, Valorant, and Apex Legends, max settings. I feel a lot of people still play their esports games at 1080p, but with a high refresh rate monitor. And here in Valorant, we're getting an average FPS of 400, which is really good. CS2 is just shy of that 240 Hz mark at 232 average FPS. And Apex Legends is also giving us really good numbers. Moving on to AAA titles, I tested a mix of older and newer games, both at 1080p and 1440p. I included games like RDR2, Ghost of Tsushima, as well as Cyberpunk 2077 and Assassin's Creed Mirage. And performance here is very solid in 1080p. We're able to max out most games and still achieve above 60 FPS. At 1440p with some of the newer titles, things are a little shaky here, but still the performance is pretty solid. You can play around with the settings a little bit to get upwards of that 60 FPS mark. I also tested ray tracing with Cyberpunk 2077 at their ray tracing ultra preset, again both at 1080p and 1440p. And the numbers here aren't that great. Of course, you won't be able to max out Cyberpunk with ray tracing on this machine. But then I forgot that this is an RTX laptop and we have DLSS frame generation. So even with ray tracing ultra, if you turn on DLSS, you should be able to get a pretty, playable experience. And that's the story here. Performance is actually very decent with the Legion 7i. So that's the performance. Now let's talk about thermals and power consumption. Talking about the thermal design on this laptop, Lenovo has, done this in a way to avoid having vents on the side, which is very annoying. Like if you've used a gaming laptop that has vents on the side, you know that when you're playing a game, hot air is actually blasting at your hand. And this design is very thoughtful and actually very convenient. So you have intake on the bottom and exhaust on the back. And inside they have a design where two fans are spinning in opposite direction to bring in cool air into a chamber, and that chamber is sealed. So hot air from that chamber does not leak into other components, generating, more heat. Now, all of that technical stuff aside, I tortured this laptop with a bunch of stress tests and extended gaming sessions just to see if it would drop performance. And the answer is yes, there is some thermal throttling. Let's say if you're playing RDR2 or Cyberpunk 2077 for an hour, it'll drop like 5% performance. That's because the performance profile on this laptop is designed in a way to limit temperature, to limit power consumption, and to limit the speed of the fan as well. So the performance profile actually does a good job of keeping this laptop stable. Now getting to specific numbers for temperature and power consumption, the CPU idles at about 45 to 47 degrees Celsius. In load conditions, let's say you're playing a CPU intensive game like Valorant, it hovers around 85 to 88 degrees Celsius, and the max temperature I saw was 97 degrees Celsius while doing a stress test. For the GPU, again, idles at around 47, 48. Under load, it is around 70 to 80 degrees Celsius, and the max temperature I saw on the GPU was 87 degrees. Power consumption on the CPU at idle is about 5 to 7 watts. Under load, it is 90 watts, and max power consumption on the CPU I saw was 98 watts. Yes, the CPU is rated for a 55 watt TDP, but for short periods, it can consume more power than that. And for the GPU power consumption, 5 to 10 watts on idle, 100 to 115 under load when you're playing heavy AAA titles, and the max you will see is 125 to 130 watts, which is including dynamic boost. And just to explain to you guys about the thermals, this part above the keyboard gets really hot. You can feel the heat in the middle of the keyboard as well and around the arrow keys. But I'm glad the area where you rest your hand does not get that hot, so it's not very uncomfortable. Now, talking about battery life and charging, the Legion 7i has a big 99.9 watt hour 4-cell lithium polymer battery with fast charge support, so you can charge it up to 70% in under 40 minutes, which is really good for a gaming laptop with this big of a battery. And if you're just doing basic stuff like YouTube, email, browsing, not really playing games and pushing the laptop too much, you can easily get 5 to 6 hours of battery life. And a pro tip here would be to switch to the iGPU. Just use the Intel UHD graphics to get the best battery life. And let's say you're using the RTX 4070 on battery and trying to game, you're gonna get anywhere from 1.5 to maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours max if you're playing games on battery, which you shouldn't. You're not going to get the full performance. It's not a good experience. So whenever you're playing games, just plug in. But if you're playing light indie titles, Dota, League of Legends, stuff like that, you're going to get like 2.5 hours of battery life. And there you have it. Those are my 2 cents on the Legion 7i 2024 from Lenovo. In terms of pricing, in the US, it's available for just under $2,000. And often it goes on sale for way less than that, so do keep an eye out for discounts and offers. And in India, you can get this for under 2 lakh rupees, around 1,95,000 rupees for this specific variant. Now, you can get it for cheaper or for more expensive, depending upon which variant you get, what upgrades you do. So do check out the link in the description down below and learn more about this laptop. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any questions or queries. I'll be there replying to you guys. Subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.